Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Asgardia Space Nation's first ever legislative webinar series. And technically, this is our second. And this is hosted by the Justice Committee. And my name is Tawana Avi Williams, and I am one of the vice chairs of the Justice Committee, and as well as a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee. So, like many members of Parliament who are actively involved in productive groups and projects throughout the nation, it became apparent that a desire within the Parliament to educate foundational structures regarding past and present legislation was necessary. My panelist today could attest to that, and let me introduce him to you today. My panelist today is none only than the Chair of Parliament, Lembit Opik.
Hi,
You could
greetings.
introduce yourself.
First of all, thanks for your patience. TJ's being very diplomatic. The reason we're late is because I'd logged in as an observer, just as a viewer, and so I could see her, and she could not see me. I would say, in my defense, it's still more successful than a re-entry by the spaceship, by the Starship of Elon Musk, and a lot cheaper. So thanks for your patience. Background is I was the first chair of Parliament. This is my second term. I've helped to create a lot of the protocols and systems that we use in Asgardia's Parliament. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm a professional politician. So when it comes to legislative process, I started in this kind of activity in the 1980s, and I have been doing it for 40 years, really. So hopefully I've learned something about how to do it and how not to do it. And maybe we've got the best practice that anyone has in the world's first fully functioning digital democracy.
Amazing. Well, before we begin, let's discuss the outline for the webinar and its purpose, along with the information regarding the next upcoming webinars that you actually will be hosting. So everyone, welcome to Exploring the Laws of Asgardia. It's a webinar series hosted by the Ministry of Justice and the Justice Committee itself. In this comprehensive series, we aim to delve into the legal landscape of the space nation of Asgardia, focusing on its regulations, its acts, and its policies. Asgardia, as a progressive and forward-thinking nation, recognizes the importance of a robust legal framework to ensure the well-being, rights, and prosperity of its citizens. Through a series of monthly webinars, we will explore and analyze various key legislative acts that form the backbone of Asgardian society. So join us as we navigate through what we previously did, the Asgardia Labor Act, and then eventually the Asgardia Standards Act. And we'll also take a look at the Asgardia Government Act, the National Currency of Asgardia Act, and many, many more. Each webinar will be hosted in conjunction with the relevant minister, a representative from Parliament, and ideally an external person, providing valuable insights into the legal framework that shapes the foundation of Asgardia. And then after the presentation, once Lembit is complete, there'll be a short Q&A for about 10 minutes where the viewers and active participants, meaning you, will get to have the opportunity to ask Lembit any questions regarding the topic that he's presenting today, that we are presenting today. Upcoming webinars that we have today is the Constitution. Next, we have this Asgardia Supreme Values, which is going to be on March 27th at 1 p.m. UTC. And then we also have the Act on Acts, which is coming up shortly after on the 29th of March at 11 a.m. UTC, which is also going to be presented by yours truly and Lembit Opik. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to the panelists. So why don't you do a quick introduction of your work with the Constitution and your back knowledge on the preparation, the creation of the Constitution while we prepare the presentation for you. And then we can go ahead and move forward from there, if you don't mind.
Yeah, that's fine. First of all, what is really important for everyone to understand is this: Asgardia exists in order to create a permanent human presence in space. That's our mission. And everything we do is designed for that. The Constitution, our legislation, our economy, the Parliament. In my life experience, Some people go into politics because they want to be politicians. I never was that kind of person. I went into politics to get certain results. And that is what our founder, Dr. Igor Bailey, has set this entire nation up to achieve. So the Constitution isn't just a document that has been created for fun or just because people wanted to talk about politics. It was put together to try to form a sensible, rational, tolerant, non-discriminating basis for an entire new society, which is Asgardia. The three things to know about the Constitution are these. It is based on expert input, based on the very most positive things which have been achieved in the United Kingdom, in the world, sorry, from the United Kingdom, which doesn't have a constitution, through to the United States, which does, all points all over the world in between. So we tried to find best practice, and those people are, and I wasn't responsible for the original creation of the Constitution. I have been involved in the referendum and updating of it, but the original Constitution was not my work, but it was work by brilliant people who looked at the best of constitutional work from all over the world. The second of three things is this: the Constitution is there to provide an anchor, a basis, a foundation for everything else. Legislation, how we interact, how we treat each other. So it's a living document. It's not something you will see in the Museum of Asgardia. It's something that I look at every month, especially when there are problems or questions, or when somebody asks me to clarify what is going on. So it's a document that you can use, and it is really the final arbiter of what we do. The third and the final thing is it's an evolving document. When we see better ways of doing it, then we have a referendum and we make changes. One example is that many colleagues in Parliament and outside Parliament said that the age restrictions for being a member of Parliament were wrong. And so we had a referendum and those age restrictions were removed. So it does evolve, and we will have a referendum whenever it's necessary to evolve the document. It's very probable that when we live in space, we will see things which must be done differently. It might be that requires an alteration to the Constitution to enable different modus operandi, maybe. Perhaps there are different values needed for interstellar travel or living on a foreign planet, which isn't the home planet. And so it's worth looking at the Constitution with a critical eye. If there are things you think need to change, then you can do so. You can make sure that that's the case, make proposals, and they will be taken on board. To summarize then, the Constitution is there to make it possible for us to live in space in peace. The Constitution was built on the very best that we have on Earth, and the Constitution is a living document so that it does evolve as Asgardia evolves. And we, of course, use it regularly to make sure that new legislation is consistent with our Constitution. That would be the overview, TJ.
Perfect. Very nice overview, Lembit, as always.
I've done it before.
And I wanted to point out, so you had a fluff this morning. I don't know if you've taken a look at my screen, but do you see how it's backwards?
No, it's not backward. It's not backward.
It looks backwards.
No, it's backward to you, but it looks, it's the right way around for us. It's a setting.
Technical weird things that we have in this world. But I'm going to go ahead.
My mistake was more. I wanted to sit down and watch my own presentation as an observer.
Okay, that one wins. That one wins. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So bear with me here. And this was created by a member of our own committee for you to present today. All right. So it's kind of for us to present kind of together, but I'm gonna go through each slide and you just present what information you find relevant and not relevant to discuss in regards to the presentation or in regards to the Constitution that you haven't already gone over. And then when you are ready to move on to the next slide, I'll go ahead and move on.
Sure. Okay. On that first one, just before you move on. Oh. What happened there? Can you still hear me? Okay. What you see here is the coat of arms of Asgardia and its motto, one unity, one humanity, and also the flag on the right. They're emblems of Asgardia, but they're not the values of Asgardia. The phrase is one unity, one humanity. The rest of that, they could evolve, but I think the phrase summarizes how we feel. And the question of unity is very important. Space is a tough place to live, and it's not a place for war. In space, everyone dies if you have a war. So I think it's really fundamental to Asgardia to have a united humanity as we make that next great step. Next slide, please. Those are the dates. I won't go through everything, but there are three important things to say from this slide. It was founded on the 12th of October 2016. So Asgardia is actually almost 8 years old now. Some people thought it would never even get going. It wouldn't survive 1 year. Well, we're into our second term of Parliament. We've just had our fourth sitting of the second term in Parliament. It's the world's first fully functioning digital democracy. I think that's partly because the Constitution is so clear. The second point to highlight from this is that the Constitution is 7 years old, September the 9th, 2017. It was agreed by, well, it came into force following a referendum of residents. So it was actually not, it was not given to Asgardia. It was embraced by Asgardia in a democratic way. And then the third and the final point is something I've already mentioned, that we had within that constitution, we have 150 members of parliament. We have 12 ministers of state, one prime minister. We have a chair of parliament, a head of nation, head of administration. All of that is established in the constitution. And it's very simple to understand. It's written so that anyone can understand it. It's not written in Latin. It's not written in Old English. And it's very easy to understand. Just one last observation. One of the most important days of my life was the inauguration of the Chair of Parliament. And that was, of the Head of Nation, involving the Chair of Parliament and the Supreme Justice in 2018. But that's different to the Constitution. It followed the establishment of the Constitution and was made possible by the Constitution. It's really central to everything that Asgardia stands for. Next slide. Unless you want to add anything at any point, TJ, of course. It's back to me again. I mentioned the symbols already. The flag, as it says there, it symbolizes the planets of our solar system. Some people argue about whether Pluto is a planet or not. I have always thought it's unfair to take its planetary status away, but that's a debate for another time. That golden circle in the middle, it does represent the sun, center of our solar system. And there is, I won't read it all out, but there's a meaning to every part of that emblem. And the motto is actually surrounded by the petals, which represent the 12 languages, once again, democratically decided based on how much different languages on Earth are used. And then on the right, we have an example of, well, there's an anthem. I think it's a really positive and a very moving anthem. As I said before, one of the most moving moments of my life was to hear that national anthem being sung at the inauguration of our head of nation in Vienna in 2018. And I always feel a warmth, and I'm always moved by the anthem, which we actually play as a tradition at the end of each parliamentary session. Let's move on. Now, this is really important. This illustrates, and what we are going to be doing in the next few slides is understanding the Constitution itself. I won't read every line. You don't need to hear every line. You can look at the recording of this afterwards to look at the slides, or you can request the slides. They are publicly available, especially if you would like to share them with other people. That's fine. The Constitution, as I said, was created by the people and approved by the people as well. Now, I will look at the purpose and the mission, because this is central to everything that Asgardia stands for. Our mission is to ensure the infinite continuity of humans as a biological species in the universe. And that includes the birth of the first human child in space. Within that, we want to see peace in space, equal opportunities, and protection of the home planet for all humankind. Just to explain, it was my acquaintance, the late Professor Stephen Hawking, who said that if human beings don't travel from Earth, then one day we will die. There will be a global catastrophe. It's just a matter of time. So we have to move into space if we think that consciousness and the human race is worth saving, and I believe it is. And in order to do that, you have to be able to have children born in space. Otherwise, logically, anyone who is pregnant has to come back to Earth to give birth. Well, if you're in Mars or on Pluto or in Alpha Centauri, that's not going to work very well. So it's an interesting crossover between science and the Constitution, that this necessity is recognized as a key element of our purpose. And for me, the first organization, the first institution I've ever seen that recognizes the importance of space birth of children is Asgardia. It has to be done responsibly and safely, of course, and there are some ethical questions too. But Asgardia recognizes this, and if it did not have such a clear constitution, I think that might not have been obvious. Let's go to the next slide. Now, there are key provisions in the Constitution. I won't read the details. The Declaration of Unity is very important. And what is so significant about this is that it unifies a nation and all its citizens, or residents as we now are, on the basis of a common cause. When I was in British politics, I noticed that the political parties would fight for power, and therefore there was a different agenda where the politicians did not always work together. In fact, they tried to attack and destroy each other in order to get power. That doesn't happen in Asgardia. We have no political factions. We haven't got a political party system. So we do not have organisms inside the political system that eat the system for their own benefit. And that's why the Declaration of Unity is so important. Space citizenship is defined within the Constitution, and so are the resources, and a sort of audit of the tools that we have at our disposal. The Constitution makes it clear that it's government by the people, and makes the one parliamentary chamber system. In other words, we don't have a bicameral system like the Lords and the Commons in the UK. We have one parliament, a bit like Estonia, which has 101 MPs. We have 150 MPs. And it explains how that parliament works, different departments, and what its purpose is. It also talks about security, which is really a very important element, especially the protection of the Earth, not from humanity, but from space threats. That's a very interesting element of what we're trying to do. And then we have a question of structure, and that covers the symbols that we saw before and some other things, including languages. Eventually, Asgardia will have its own language, but at the moment, we recognize 12 Earth languages, which represent the massive majority of the human race. Let's move on. In addition to that, we have an administrative system which supports the above the government and the parliament. It doesn't exist for its own reasons. And then it outlines procedures really for legislative processes, amending the Constitution itself and so forth. And we've used that process one time. What's really important is to recognize that the Constitution reflects a vision and an idealism, which is, in my view, not a dirty word. Idealism is why I went into politics. And as it says here underlined, it represents the hope for a new era for space humanity, transcending earthly boundaries and embracing the infinite universe. And to me, that's what makes Asgardia so different. It's externally focused. It's not about protecting Asgardia. It's about advancing humankind. And Asgardia is a tool to achieve that. I don't know what that will look like in 1,000 years' time. There may be quite a different structure. But Asgardia will have been the seed that fertilized the universe with a good approach by the human race. Let's move on. The overall situation is okay, the overall situation.
That was it.
I know. I wanted to. Okay, I was going to talk about the last slide. Okay, doesn't matter.
Oh,
Right.
I didn't know that was actually a picture, so I apologize.
I was just going to summate, but it doesn't matter. Leave it now.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, the overall picture is this: when we work in Asgardia in the Parliament, we spend a lot of time talking about making legislation, about problems that we have, about building the economy, about particular events that are taking place. But I finished where I started. The whole point of the Constitution and everything we do, including this seminar, this webinar, is to answer this question: how do we make a peaceful human contribution to the future of life in the universe? What do we have to do to make the most of consciousness and whatever you may believe spirit is in this cosmos? The Constitution is just a tool to achieve that, as is Parliament. And when you think about it like that, we are at our most successful when the things that we write, the laws we pass, and the Constitution we embrace works in the greater interest of all humankind and actually all known life in the universe, which at the moment is all on Earth. TJ.
Thank you very much, Lembit. I really appreciate your insight on today's presentation. And Ida, if you're watching, thank you very much for your work with Sharam on that presentation for Lembit. It was very much appreciated. And just a few notes. The Declaration of Unity definitely is something that spoke to me when I became a resident of Asgardia. And as you guys can see, I'm a member of Justice, and we take Justice. Justice is a very different monster in itself. I say monster, but it's really not. We look at the branches of government very differently, but justice for us is not the same as justice is in the United States. But we do take it very seriously, and we do have laws and legal aspects to Asgardia, but we definitely don't look at it in ways that we want to influence war or conflict or to create this evolution of, separation and, not being inclusive and not being diverse. So I think that the Constitution itself really set the tone apart from other nations. And I'm really grateful to be a part of this nation, and that a nation like Asgardia was able to come up with something so creative and so inspirational. So, there's a question. I mean, and it's perfect timing. It's Q&A time. Unless you had anything else to comment, this is the ideal time to ask or raise any questions between myself, to ask questions between any of the people watching. And let me pull up the Q&A. Let's see, Jerry Stone said, I would say that Asgardia is not so much for the exploration of space, but for the settlement of space. How do you feel about that?
Yes, that's right. But the subset of settlement is exploration. You can't settle a place you haven't explored. Otherwise, it's like going on holiday to a place you haven't researched. You may not like it. So the subset of settlement is exploration. I would make it even more fundamental than that, though. What we are trying to do is create, as I said at the beginning, a permanent human space habitation. That's not like the International Space Station, where usually astronauts and cosmonauts and cosmonauts stay for 6 months and then come home. We mean that you are settled off Earth, either in orbit or another celestial body, so that you have children there, you work there, you die there, you fall in love there. You have all of the human experiences that we have on planet Earth. So that's permanent settlement, yes. But we need to explore where the best place is. The reason that the Moon and Mars are the front runners It's because we have done some exploration there. Those are the two most explored places in the universe outside Earth's atmosphere. So yes, it's a matter of what are the steps, what are the process points, and what's the outcome. The process is exploration. The outcome is settlement. I would add one other thing. In my personal view, there is some aspect of the human spirit which does need to explore. When a very famous man called Mallory was asked, "Why do you want to climb Mount Everest?" He said, "Because it's there." And I do think that there is a wanderlust, there is a curiosity in the human spirit which achieves so much, which makes so much happen. But for Asgardia, it's not the exploration. In 1,000 years' time, for Asgardia, it is the fact that 10 billion people, or consciousnesses and other life, have successfully settled without causing harm to other parts of the universe on celestial objects and in orbit around those objects without having to all live on Earth. DJ.
Did that answer your question, Jerry? I hope so. And honestly, when you think about it, those two locations also have been the two primary locations due to the fact of when you look at resources for primary settlement as well. And there are other locations that they've looked at. But I definitely think I agree with the aspect. It's almost like manifest destiny, but we're not looking at it from a consumption aspect. We're not trying to take over something in order for that benefit, to take over in that aspect. We're looking for the betterment of the human race in the long run, is my understanding. And so for us, it's not just about settlement, but it's about, like, we think about safe practices. I mean, when we're coming up with ideas and legislation and foundational frameworks of the things that we're trying to create, we definitely look at all aspects. We're thinking of space law, space environment, even the smallest grain, the smallest particle, we understand can affect the balance of the universe. So we are not about to disrupt that balance. We want to try to find a happy balance between the two. And if we can create some sort of permanent establishment in that happy balance, then that would be great.
Yeah, just one thing that you make an interesting point about. A debate which Asgardia will have to have one day is this: what happens if we find a planet like Earth, which is really nice for us, but is already inhabited? Are we going to do what we have done when we've colonized different continents on Earth, where there have been winners and losers? Or can we find a better way? Now, we won't answer that question now, TJ, but I do think it's a question that the Constitution will have to give answers to. Coexistence rather than genocide would be my preference, but it's absolutely central to the value system of Asgardia and the effectiveness of our Constitution to give us the moral answers to those questions before we face them.
Great answer to the question. Some follow-up questions I have. So the first prompt question is, how are the changes to the Constitution made?
The changes to the Constitution are made democratically. The original Constitution was passed by a referendum of the residents of Asgardia, citizens one day. Residents are what we call Asgardian citizens at the moment, because we're still working out how best to define citizenship. That's the only reason. It's not because we intend to stay with only residents. Citizenship is a complicated thing to define, and so we use residents as a working title for now. So the residents of Asgardia, well, the Asgardians generally voted for the original Constitution. Then we identified some things which could be improved. For example, removal of the age limit or the original age limit for Asgardia's parliament. And we then put together, and by what I mean by we is the constitutional development team spent time working through these proposals and those proposals came from parliamentarians, from other Asgardians, and a package was put together, and the package was voted for as a whole. There was some debate about whether every individual proposal should be voted for individually, but that just takes too much effort and time. You can't do that because there was a large number. I don't remember the exact number now, but large number, over a dozen changes. And we could have done yes, no, but instead it was the package as a whole. Why that way? Because there has to be some trust in the system. The people, the constitutional amendment team had no reason to make bad decisions. They wanted to make the best decisions they could. So they put together the package. I was on that team, and we had a summit on this on a number of occasions, including in Corfu at what's called the Corfu Summit, which has tended to be an annual event for the key players in Asgardia. And then it was presented to the whole of Asgardia for a referendum vote, and it was passed. So that's how it happened. And looking ahead, sorry, if you want to make a change, you can make those recommendations now. It's a living document, and we will store up all the changes. When there are enough changes, we'll have a referendum. TJ.
Perfect. Sorry, I was trying to get the follow-up question for you. Okay. Give me 1 second. Thank you. And then we also have another question from Jerry, who's live. Let me go ahead and go to his question really quick, and then I actually have, and then so, okay, so Jerry Stone, he said a few minutes ago, in his 1962 speech, President Kennedy quoted George Mallory asking why he wanted to climb Everest and saying, because it's there. And he said, well, space is there and we're going to climb it. And the moon and the planets are there, and new hopes for knowledge and peace are there. So I think he just wanted to just show you the rest of the quote.
Yeah, Mallory. Well, that's true. Mallory died on the mountain. Some say, and I suppose I hope that he was the first to get to the summit. He certainly got to within 260 meters of the summit of Everest. We'll never know really whether he got there or not. But he represented iconically the spirit of human exploration. But he never wanted to live on the summit of Everest. In some ways, those people who got onto the Kon-Tiki raft and proved that a small raft could travel right across a transcontinental ocean, they were more like Asgardians, because at some point a spaceship will leave the Earth or the moon, never to return. And probably the people who live on that spacecraft will never, they'll be dead when their physical bodies will be dead when they arrive at their destination. And to me, that's different to going up a mountain and coming back. But why do we go to the universe? Because it's there. If it wasn't there, we would have to settle for Earth. But we know it is there. And it seems to me absolutely clear that the human spirit will take us there. And Asgardia wants to make that trip peacefully and sustainably, and make sure that we don't create a genocide when we arrive.
Well said. Well said. We have a lot of questions for you coming up. So here,
I'll be quicker then.
All right. So next question was, during the constitutional referendum, were there any foundational changes to it, or is it basically the same?
It's fundamentally the same. We didn't change this is my opinion. That's actually an opinion question. But my opinion, I'll try and keep it quicker, sorry, because I'm really very interested in the subject myself. So maybe I want to talk a lot about it because I've been here really since Parliament began. My opinion is that we didn't change the foundations. The mission's the same. The purpose is the same. The fundamental structure of government and Parliament is the same. But there were course corrections. For example, there is a system now of accountability for the Prime Minister that wasn't exactly defined before. There are other elements of how the justice system works. I think that they were operational changes mainly rather than constitutional changes. I'd summarize it like this, TJ. The referendum made the constitution sharper and clearer, but it did not alter the direction of the constitution. The values are the same. Their interpretation in operational fact is better defined.
Beautiful execution of the question.
Well, thank you. It was a very good question.
Thank you. Well, thank you to the prompting of the questions out here. They're great. The next prompting of the question is something that I guarantee you we get asked all the time. And it is, why is it Kingdom Asgardia? Well, why is it the Kingdom of Asgardia? Is it a monarchy? So a lot of people ask this question, are we a kingdom, or are we the Kingdom of Asgardia, or why do we call it Asgardia? If you could elaborate.
Well, there are two questions. Why is it called Asgardia? Because it's the city of the gods. And indeed, we are having a major event in Dallas, Texas, to celebrate the next solar eclipse and really draw attention to Asgardia. And there has been some discussion about whether the kingdom of the gods gives us a clue to what we should call our event. I will leave that for now. But Dr. Asher Bailey believes we should be striving in that almost spiritual way to the heavens. That's what in England we call the cosmos, the heavens. And that's not a religious statement, but there is something transcendental to the idea of inhabiting places off Earth. It's an incredibly exciting idea, probably as exciting as when Christopher Columbus set sail to go around the world, when people during the previous ice age took a great walk from one continent to another across a land bridge, which was made possible by the frozen land. So that's why it's called Asgardia, because it captures what Dr. Asher Bailey, our founder, wanted our nation to be. Now, in terms of the second part, what would you say, TJ? I'm answering all the questions. How would you answer the second? I'll share my view in a minute. I just don't want to exclude you.
I wouldn't say it's a monarchy. I know that from my understanding, there is always the potential that in a parliament, like when you have a parliament established system, that there is the potential that it can convert over into a monarchy like system, where the head of nation would then like move over into a position of where he would be like the king of Asgardia. However, do we see something like that happening anytime soon? I don't think so. Is there the potential of it happening? There's like a small potential of it happening, maybe, but I highly doubt it. I think that the system that we have at this moment is working for us, and it's working for what we need for Asgardia and for our missions and for what our goals and our expectations are for our nation. And honestly, I don't think that there is really a need for us to move in that direction, but I think that the possibility is there, and if the opportunity presented itself and we needed to move in that direction, that we definitely could, because our system is set to move that way. But that's not what we have currently right now.
I asked you that question because you've joined Asgardia in the recent election, and I'll tell you what I believe, because I've obviously spoken to the head of nation a lot about that, and I'm just interested in the perception, because that is pretty much what the head of nation would say as well. His answer is consistent with what you've said. Head of nation, when asked, "Are you a king? Are you a president? Are you a dictator?" He says, "I'm whatever you want to call me, whatever makes you feel comfortable." So if I'm in a monarchy, I'm a king. If I'm in a republic, I'm the president. I don't care. I'm the head of nation, because that's what we call it in Asgardia. He has a lot of power. The head of nation, whoever that is, has a lot of power. They could rule by decree, But I've learned in my experience of politics, TJ, that even a dictator gets controlled by, in most cases, in every case really, gets controlled by the people around them to an extent. So I think we've chosen the phrase Kingdom of Asgardia because it's quite glamorous phrase. It makes sense in a way, but people should not be literal about this. Dr. Asher Bailey doesn't act like a member of the royal family in Britain. He acts as a person who is appointed by the people of Asgardia. Remember, there was an election to re-elect him to that position, so he didn't appoint himself. We appointed him. And the last thing I'll say about this is that sometimes people who criticize Asgardia say, oh, well, look, you've got a king. Well, if you live in a kingdom, if that makes you feel good, then call him a king. What we've got is a leader who's had the vision to create the world's first fully functioning digital democracy and the only effective nation state that is dedicated solely to the habitation of the universe, of Earth. So it's an interesting philosophical conversation. And when I meet Asgardians, I often, as you say, TJ, have that conversation. But the way to look at it is Dr. Asher Bailey, as the first head of nation, doesn't worry too much about what other people call him because they're all terrestrial definitions. But he is the head of nation. He is the head of a nation. And whatever, I think I'd summarize it like this: whatever your head of nation is called in your country, that's what he is.
I definitely agree. I think that I'm glad that I was spot on that because if he's listening, yay for me. Brownie points for me. Just no, because in my opinion, that's from what I've read and just from the way that the structure is, that's where I went with that. So moving on to the next question, there's two more prompt questions, and this one's a big one. So Asgardia's absolute supreme value unstoppable unstoppable world cognition, world transformation, world creation, humanity striving into the infinite future, the infinite universe, and the infinite new universes, which we will go into detail in the next webinar. But Asgardia stays out of all earthly politics and earthly state affairs. How do you plan to transform the world then?
We don't. We have no plan to transform Earth. It's not our job. We have a plan to take the best of human experience in politics, culture, economics, and science from Earth and apply that in space. Let me explain. From the very beginning, Dr. Asher Bailey has said we do not participate in terrestrial politics because that would put an impossible pressure on a nation that consists of 220 other nations. You can't take a side in a war if you've got people from both sides of that war in your nation. But it's actually even more fundamental than that, because the response could be, oh, but sometimes there's right and wrong. Maybe. And each of us have the right to have personal opinions about that. I, as the Chair of Parliament, will never express a preference in one direction or another if any conflict exists here on the planet. Because once you make a statement once, you need to make a statement every time. And then we take our attention away from what we are focused on. It's a future life living in peace off the planet, not a future life living in peace on the planet. There are other people who are supposed to do that. And if you want to make a peaceful Earth, go into Earth politics. There are many opportunities. Everybody watching has the chance to do that. Whatever your political system, you have the chance to get involved in your local politics. But you won't be doing it as an Asgardian. We won't stop you. You're perfectly entitled to be a member of parliament in your own country and still be an Asgardian member of parliament. But we cannot be in a situation where we pretend that we can mediate. We can pretend or that we desire to influence solutions on the planet. This has caused some very public debate in the Parliament of Asgardia, because we all know there are various high-profile conflicts continuing on the planet at the minute. But the answer is always the same. We do not contribute to those debates, even if emotionally in our hearts we feel strongly for one side or the other, perhaps because we come from one of the countries that's at war or in conflict. When there's a natural disaster, it's different, because we are here for humanity. If an earthquake kills millions, we can send our condolences and support, if we can, to that country. If there's a space accident, our hearts go out to those pioneers, regardless of their nation. But that's different. So to summarize, we cannot get involved in saving the earth from itself. We have the ambition of saving space from the mistakes we have made on earth.
Wow, that was very well put. I was like, wow.
I've thought about it for decades.
Oh wow, when you talked about how can you be involved in earthly affairs when you have members of both parts of those like earthly conflicts within your own nation. I mean, that was very impactful, that statement right there alone, because I've witnessed it with my own eyes, seeing the empathy and the compassion on members of our parliament's faces, where, you know, we've had to admit speaking about things that are going on in current affairs. And it can get very difficult at times. However, we all have the same mission, the same end result in mind. And I just think that was very well put.
Well,
very beautifully, very eloquently put.
Thank you for saying. I should tell you that even when I was in British politics, I had that mindset. I worked in this was nothing to do with Asgardia, but I worked in trying to resolve a very difficult situation in one part of the United Kingdom, in Northern Ireland, where I grew up. And people have been killed there because of politics. And even then, I didn't feel I wanted to take a side. So it's in my nature to not try to regard the defeat of one culture as the victory for another. Asgardia doesn't even start that. We don't have an army. We are not going to have an army. Whatever's happening on Earth, the one thing we want to do is protect Earth from external threat. So for all the wars and the temptation to comment on those wars on the planet, our mission is to stop a near-Earth object wiping out all humanity and all life on Earth. That is a noble ambition, because it doesn't take a side, except the side of life.
Very well put. And that's why you're the chair of parliament.
Well, I've learned a lot of this in the job, to be honest with you. I had no template. I had no precedent for this role. And so therefore, a lot of what I'm saying we have learned together across the last many years that we've been traveling together. But they are insights which we hope in Asgardia might educate terrestrial politicians to see things differently too. But it's not our duty to force those messages on them. One other thing, I know there will be viewers now who feel very strongly they want Asgardia to take a side. They say, well, why can't you condemn this group, or why can't you condemn that bad action? Just remember, once you do it once, you have to do it for everyone. Because in my experience of politics, everyone thinks they're right, whatever side they're on. And we haven't got the resources. And more than anything, the Constitution doesn't give us the right to do that. That's one example where the Constitution is absolutely clear. Stay out of Earth politics. Just get it right in space.
I agree. I was literally about to bring up the Constitution. If you didn't bring it up, I was about to. I was going to say, and the Constitution doesn't allow us to do so either. Yeah. It protects all of us in that way. And it kind of keeps us safe as well. I mean, we are all trying to create like this inclusive, diverse environment where we should all feel safe and protected from our earthly affairs. So if we were to condemn one environment, we're almost condemning members of our own parliament and members of our own nation. And that's not what we want to promote. So I think that was really important to mention. Our last prompted question is, do we need bilateral agreements with earthly states to open Asgardia's embassies? Is the first part of the question. And then the second part of the question is when and where to expect the first embassy. That is a good question.
We don't need bilateral agreements to open our embassies, but we do need bilateral agreements to maximize the effectiveness of those embassies and of the nation itself. Let me explain. We can open an embassy anywhere. London, Paris, Rome, Rio de Janeiro, Sao Paulo, South Pole if you want to. And we can say what we believe its status is. And many millions of people could agree with us. So we can do that now. It's best when we get the government of the nation where we open that embassy to recognize it as an embassy or a consulate, because suddenly we begin to give real rights on a terrestrial basis to Asgardian citizens. It could mean that you can use your Asgardian identity card or your passport to travel somewhere. And that's a tremendously important right if you can have that. It makes the citizenship of Asgardia really valuable. It also gives you responsibilities. You still have to obey the laws of the land that you're in. If you choose to go to Japan, then you've got to obey the rules of Japan. You can't say, well, I ignore the rules of Japan because I'm a Asgardian. In the same way that today a British person has to obey the rules of America if they travel there. So I can't just break the rules in Dallas because I say, well, that rule doesn't apply in Britain when I go there for the eclipse. So it is best if and when we get that recognition. And I'm working on that. And the Foreign Affairs Act, which is led by Ferda Inan, is really important. It's going through stages of legislation at the moment, and that will form the basis of how we get that bilateral recognition. And I expect that will be a large part of my work in supporting other people in Asgardia and having those negotiations. It's not technically my responsibility, but I was involved at a very early stage, and I continue to be involved in Europe with a country that I hope will eventually recognize us. In terms of the other part of the question, I expect the first embassy will be opened in Istanbul because Ferda Inan, the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, has made great progress. And indeed, I spoke with her last night after the other meetings, and she puts me under pressure all the time, under pressure to help her deliver that result. It's great that she does that. I value it when you push me in Parliament and beyond to make that happen. That doesn't have to be the first one, but I think that'll be the first one on Earth where we will have a physical presence. And that's a very exciting opportunity because Istanbul really is one of the meeting points on the Earth, like Dubai, maybe like London, maybe, but Istanbul really is a vibrant place where East and North and South and West all meet. And there are 34 million people living in Istanbul, in that single city, half the population of the United Kingdom. So there are many people. If 1% of them joined Asgardia, we'd have gone a huge way towards, or even 0.1%, a huge way towards achieving our mission objective in terms of increasing residency. TJ.
Okay, well, that concludes the Q&A. I want to thank everyone for participating in the webinar series today, sponsored by the Ministry of the Justice Department. On behalf of the Justice Committee, we want to give a special thanks to you, Lembit, for participating today in this seminar and in the upcoming two webinars that will be presented in the following on the Asgardia Supreme Values and the Act on Acts. Those are two very, very important pieces of legislation as well. And you will be seeing you again in the future after that as well. As one of the vice chairs of justice, I admire your dedication and hope to aspire to a level of your accolades within our nation one day. Maybe I'll be sitting in your chair as well. And for viewers watching, come and join us every Thursday. We don't bite. We have our Q&A sessions. I mean, I might. Just kidding. But come and join us for our Q&A sessions. It is every single Thursday at 11 UTC. Well, it's 11 a.m. UTC. And we would love to have you.
No, the Q&A is actually 1800 UTC. It's 11 a.m. where you are. That's your American
okay, 11
time.
a.m. UTC. Okay,
no, it's 1800 UTC.
Oh,
1800.
but it's 11 a.m. MST for me.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's your time.
1800
Yeah,
UTC.
yeah, yeah,
Correction.
yeah.
Correction. So come join us. We may seem
1800.
like space nerds or something that seems unreal, but we're really proud and we're really real. And we're proud to be residents and a part of a diverse and inclusive nation. I'm a standing example of that, and you can be too. Um, I also want to make sure that everyone is aware we do have a really amazing event coming up in Dallas, Texas. It is the Asgardia Space Nation Total Eclipse Extravaganza. If you do not have access to that information, please let us know, and we will be happy to send you the event link. Both myself and Lembit will be attending this event, and you will have special access. If you purchase meet and greet tickets to meet us in person and have one-on-one time with us, to ask us any questions in person, take pictures with us then and then and then and then. So, and more really fun things to come with that as well. So, and there's really great opportunities available with that comes along with that as well. So, until next time, reach for the stars, and we'll see you at the next webinar. Oh, wait, there's a question I think that just came in. Hey, Jerry. Jerry wanted me to say really quick, thank you both for today's discussion. It's been very interesting, and I look forward to the future events. Best wishes to all fellow Asgardians. Well, Jerry, just to answer, I'm going to answer this question live really quick, if you don't mind, Lembit. Jerry, please come and join us. We're here every Thursday, and if you're not a resident of Asgardia and you just want to log on and just do a preliminary search, you're more than welcome to look up my information. I love to designate myself as a representative in the Northern American area. And even if you're not in Northern America, I'm here to answer any of your questions. And so are any of the Asgardians. So we're here. Lembit is here. Reach out to one of us. We are not afraid to talk to you. Even if you just want to have a new person to call a friend. So we're here. And thank you for watching as well. Lembit.
Thank you. And hopefully you feel inspired by what we said about the Constitution. And as TJ says, join us. This is your chance. Leave a legacy for your children and grandchildren, and even if you haven't got children, for the rest of humanity. Asgardia is not a theoretical thing. It's not playtime. It's not Minecraft, which is what every child on the planet seems to be playing. We're actually investing something here based on a Constitution which makes a lot of sense, with some great people for a great reason, to go in peace for all humankind and see what's out there. And that's got to be worth €100 a year.